Good morning, Year 8. Thank you for engaging with our online lessons once again. If you could please send me that message on Show My Homework so that I can mark you down the register, that would be fantastic. And today's lesson is going to be mostly self-marked. If you can please send me those messages on red@theroyal.school for any help. Again, I'm in school every day this week for the Year 10s, so it might take me a few moments to get back to you, but please be patient on that. And then if you'd like to submit any work to me, please make sure it's self-marked, and then you can send that via Show My Homework, and I can give you any feedback if there's any mistakes that you've made. So today we're going to have a look at some revision work on percentages, increasing and decreasing, and I'm also going to be talking about something called multipliers, which will be putting us in a good position ready for our later lessons on percentages, and we're going to ramp up the difficulty quite a bit. So developing students will be able to calculate percentages of quantities. Secure students will be able to increase and decrease by given percentages, and excelling students will be able to calculate a percentage increase or decrease. So I'd like you to write down here how you could calculate the given percentages of a quantity in a quick way. And if you'd like to pause the video until you've got the answers to these, we can run through those. So answers to this: 50% we should be aware is identical to a half with our fraction, decimal and percentage equivalent. So we could divide a number by 2. 50% is also the same as 0.5, so you can actually multiply a number by 0.5 to get 50% of it. Same way with 25%, you could find your 50% first by halving and then half again, or you could divide by 4 straight away because 25% is a quarter, or in this decimal multiplier way that we'll be speaking about later on, 25% is equal to 0.25 as a decimal, so you can multiply a number by 0.25. 10%, you can divide a number by 10, or of course this decimal version that we're on about quite often here, we could times by 0.1. 5%, you could find your 10% and halve it. If you're doing it mentally, you could divide something straight away by 20 because 5% is the same as a 20th, or we could multiply a number by 0.05 is another way we could do that one. 20% then, you could divide a number by 10 to find 10% and then double it to get 20%. 20 hundredths is equivalent to 1/5, so you could just divide something by 5, or this decimal version that yet again you could times a number by 0.2, and then 1%, you could divide a number straight away by 100 because obviously percentages are out of 100. So percentages are linked in proportion. It makes it really nice and easy for us to be able to find out complicated percentages by breaking them down and showing a little bit of working out. So if I started off with 28 as my 100% of an amount, we can use these quick methods to find out loads of different key percentages that might help us out with some more complicated working out. So I've moved downwards through these bubbles. 50% we said is the same as a half, so you can get 14. And then 25% is half of a half, or straight away you can divide our original number by 4, and that's going to give us 7. For 10%, we can divide a number by 10. And then for 5%, we can half our 10%, or we can divide our original amount by 20, and that gets us 1.4. And then to get our 1%, we could either take the original amount and divide it by 100, we could take our 10% and divide it by 10, or we could even take our 5% and divide it by 5, and that would give us 0.28. Now, if you can work out these key percentages, then you can piece them together in order to find some much more complicated ones. So if we're to look at a more complicated percentage to work out, here we've got 72% of 80. We can have a think which of those key percentages we would need in order to make 72%. There's loads of different ways of doing this, so your method might differ from mine slightly, but we should still end up with the same answer. So 72% of 80, well, we could get a 50% of it, so we've got a total of 50% obviously so far. We can add a 10% to that gets us up to a total of 60% of the number. Another 10%, we've got a total of 70% of the number, and then we can add 2 1%, and this will give us a total of 72%. So if we add up those key percentages that we've worked out, we'll end up with 57.6. So we can do the same with 38% of 64. Now, I'll leave this one for you to have a look at, so if you'd like to pause the video until we work it through, but do show some working out, especially if you're calculating these mentally. So 38% of 64, we might start off with 3 lots of 10%, and then we want to need our 8% then, so we could do a 5 and 3 ones. add those together, and we should have our answer of 24.32. So we can use those to piece together with our key percentages some more complicated ones. I'd like you then to have a go at these 8 questions, please, quickly, and then we're actually going to check our answers later on, but I'd like you to try this without a calculator, please, so that you can show that working out in the manner that we did in that previous slide. So pause the video until you're ready to continue. I'm going to show us a slightly different way of doing our percentages, and we're going to use that to check our answers in just a second. So calculator methods for percentages. If we, for example, needed 46% of 90, we can pop this in the calculator, really straightforward and easy way, and we could think of our percentages as out of 100. So 46% of 90 is really asking us to find 46/100ths of 90. So we could pop that in the calculator as is. Now the way I'd like people to think about this is that I would like you to turn this 46/100 into one single number straight away. And this would be called the multiplier method. Remember, of in fractions means a multiply. So 46/100 of 90 means 46/100 times 90. And then we could put that as a single calculation, 46/100 times 90. As I say, with this multiplier method, if you can do that as 0.46 straight away times 90, it'll stand you in real good stead for our upcoming lessons. And that would give us an answer then of 41.4. So a quick calculator way of doing percentages here. So if you could go back and check your answers using a calculator for these, and then I'll just run through the multiplier methods for them very quickly once you're ready. So number 1, we should have been doing 0.15 times 30. Number 2, 0.45 times 70. Number 3, 0.63 times 120. Number 4, 0.34 times 32, and so on, leading to question 8. So that'd be 0.645 times 48. You're obviously not going to have 2 decimal points, you can't have that in a number. So just convert it into its decimal first and multiply by it. So we're going to move on to percentage increases. Now, here we've got the value of Frank's house has gone up by 20% in the last year. If the house was worth £150,000 1 year ago, how much is it worth now? Find the result in a single calculation. The single calculation part is going to be quite useful here. I prefer people to move away from the sort of long-winded working out that we've got. And if we can do these single calculations, as I said, all this is really prep for our more complicated percentages. Now, we can show this as a visual representation first. In our visual representations, we always have the original amount as 100%. This has caused confusion with some students in the past, as with our increases we end up actually getting over 100%. That's fully possible, and if anyone's told you that you can't have more than 100%, then they're actually mistaken when we start to talk about increases and decreases. So the original amount here is 100%, and the value of Frank's house in the first line there has gone up by 20%. So we're going to put the extra 20% on at the end. So how much do we have in total? We have 120% then, because we've got the original amount plus this percentage increase, and therefore we find that percentage of 150,000. So we're going to find 120 100ths, because we've got greater than a whole one, times 150,000. Now, if you're using the multiplier method for this, as we've mentioned in all of our previous slides, then as a single calculation, it might be better to write that as 1.2 times 150,000. That would be our fraction that we've got here, just turned into a decimal. 120 over 100 is 1.2. So 1.2 times 150,000, and it gets us our final answer of £180,000 here. It's always worth just making a little check on this. Is our original price smaller than our answer? Yes, so we have to perform an increase here, we know on the right lines. We can do the same then with a decrease. So here we've got a Bluetooth speaker which originally cost £75, is going to be reduced by 30% in a sale. So what's the sale price? So let's show that visual representation of it to start off with again. The original price is going to be 100%. We're taking away 30% from it. So 30% reduced, and it leaves us with 70% left. So the new price is 70% of the original amount, because we've taken that 30% off it. So always treat your original amount as 100% in these questions. So now we can do our 70 100ths of 75, and again use this multiplier method. So 70 100ths here we could rewrite as a single decimal and we could have 0.7 times 75. That would get us straight to our answer. So 0.7 times 75 is going to give us 52.5. And remember, that's going to be put back into monetary terms. So don't just leave it as a 0.5. That's pence. So it needs to be the 52.50 to make sense with pounds and pence here. So that's going to really be our multiplier methods for this, and I really want people to try and get used to this method. I'm well aware that some people will be able to calculate 30% of the item mentally and then do a subtraction to get that, but it's this multiplier method I really need everyone on board with, ready to move on, because we're going to look at some reverse percentages in upcoming lessons and some compound percentages where we've got multiple percentage increases or decreases happening, and this multiplier method is going to be essential for that. So I've got 8 of these for you to quickly try, and then I'll run through the multiplier methods before we move on to your independent activity for this. So if you'd like to pause the video until you've had a go at them, I'll run through the methods we might need later on. So answers as follows. So number 1, if you're increasing by 40%, you end up with 140%. So we should be doing 50 times 1.4 or 1.4 times 50 to get straight to our answer. For number 2, if you're decreasing something by 20%, you're left with 80%. So we should be doing 75 times 0.8, or vice versa, 0.8 times 75 to get our answer. Number 3, we should be doing 45 times 1.63. For number 4, we should be doing 67 times by 0.63. Remember, if you take 37% off something, you're left with 63%, so 67 times 0.63. For number 5, we should be doing 82 times by 0.86, because it's a decrease again. If you take 14% off something, you're left with 86% of it, so 82 times 0.86. For number 6, we've got another increase, so we've got 136 times 1.24, should be left with 124% of it. For number 7, we'd be doing 49 times 0.81, and then for number 8, we've got an increase again, so it'd be 88 times 1.56. So if it helps you out with drawing those bars and the diagrams to visualize these, it might be really useful just to get you started. Remember, those increases are going to be over 100%, so 1 point something, and then those decreases are going to be less than 100%, so you should be multiplying by 0 point something. So those should be our learning objectives met for this lesson. You can now move on to the independent activity that's linked to on Show My Homework. As always with those core bit worksheets, the parts A, B, C, D just give you more practice at that style of question. So as soon as you're confident with a couple of those parts of a question, move yourselves on to the next question number. So it's probably better and for progress for you to do 1AB, 2AB, 3AB than it is to do 1A all the way to the end of those parts before moving on. You'll make your progress quicker. So as soon as you're confident, move on to the next question number, and the answers are linked to you there so you can self-assess your work. So if you haven't already, then please submit your work on Show My Homework or send me that message just so I can register you on the lesson, and make sure to be self-marking your work afterwards. Remember, red@theroyal.school if you do need a hand, and work submissions via Show My Homework. Just to reiterate, I was in school today, so it might take me a few moments to get back to you, but please be patient with that. Thank you very much. I'll speak to you next week.